Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast is not legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I've got to tell you that. So now I've done that, I want to assure you that nothing will ever prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So let's get going. Applying for ERISA disability or individual disability insurance benefits involves filling out lots of forms, including the infamous activity of daily living form. Your responses to that form can make or break your claim. It pays for you to take the time to complete the form accurately and truthfully. Your ERISA disability carrier or plan will ask you to complete this form many, many times during the course of your claim. So you should take it seriously every time you're asked to complete it. Yes, it's a pain, but don't blow it off. The ADL form is going to ask a lot of questions, and these will include questions about your medical condition, how your illness, injuries, or conditions limit your ability to work, what you do during the typical day, your specific daily activities, and your ability to perform activities such as sitting, standing, walking, and lifting. Now, you must be truthful in completing this form. Don't exaggerate, simply tell the truth. Now, I'm a lawyer, and I know that may be simplistic, but it is really hard to do in practice, and I know that. In fact, I think there are traps built into ADL forms that carriers will seize on to deny the claim. And as a result, I'm going to walk you through how to answer some of the ADL common questions and the traps that you need to look out for. So specifically, I'm going to talk about 4 things today. That question, how should I answer the question, what keeps you from working? How should I answer the question, how bad is your pain? Tips for how to answer the question, what do you do during a typical day? And when I apply for ERISA disability benefits, why do they ask me what I do around my house? Got it? Well, let's take a break before we get started. Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Ready to get started? How should I answer the question, what keeps you from working? Well, obviously, the answer is truthfully. You remember you've seen these TV shows where they swear in the witness and have them take an oath that says that they promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Well, it's a bit like that, but in reality, telling the quote unquote truth about what keeps you from working can be easier said than done. So let's talk about this. You may be tempted to answer this question by talking about your diagnosis. The claims examiner and the liar for hire insurance doctors are going to review your medical records, and they are going to also look at these ADL forms and your answers. The doctors understand the diagnosis, and this is not really what the question is asking you. The question really is about your symptoms that you have and how those symptoms impact your ability to do the material and substantial duties of your occupation. Now, I think the words prevent you from working is disingenuous, because the issue is whether or not you can do the material and substantial duties of your own occupation or any occupation, as those terms are defined in the policy or plan. I think you need to understand that definition so that you can be thinking about what your occupational duties are, as defined, and then what symptoms you have that would prevent you from doing those occupational duties. You need to get a copy of your policy or plan and look at what that definition of own occupation is. Now, some policies will say it's not your occupation as performed for your employer, or it's not your occupation as performed in the local economy, or it's not even your occupation as it's performed in the national economy, like you might know. It might say your occupation is defined as it is described in the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Now, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles hasn't been updated since 1990, but you want to, if that's the standard, get out the Dictionary of Occupational Titles description for your job duties so you can see what they are. I also think you should get your employer's description of your occupational duties. Take out a piece of paper and on the left-hand side, write down what are the occupational duties as described by the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, if that's applicable, what your employer says your duties are, and then what your actual duties are. And after each duty, I think you should be drawing a line and talking about your symptoms. Now, this question is really about what are the symptoms that you have, what is the severity of your symptoms, and how potentially would those symptoms interfere with your ability to do the material and substantial duties of your occupation. So why is all of this important? Well, one of the things that their liar for hire doctors are also going to be looking at is the symptoms that you describe. And they want to look at those symptoms as you're describing them on your activity of daily living form, and then look at the symptoms as they've been described by your doctor in the medical records. Are those two descriptions consistent? And are those symptoms consistent with a diagnosis? And are those symptoms consistent with a level of severity that would keep you from doing your own occupation? Many times I will see that the liar for hire peer review doctor agrees that the symptoms exist and are related to the diagnosis, but they'll say they don't rise to this level of severity that would prevent you from doing the material and substantial duties of your occupation or any occupation. And of course, they're looking at the history of your symptoms and then looking at the diagnostic studies and the physical exam findings and saying, are these consistent? Also, is the nature of your symptoms consistent with the nature of the treatment? In other words, there's a certain level of improvement that might be expected with different types of treatment, and they want to see whether or not your symptoms are consistent with the nature of the treatment. And are those symptoms consistent with your reported response to the treatment? In other words, if you say you're not getting any benefit, but you're out there walking your dog and bending over, that can be problematic because of the inconsistency. And of course, are those symptoms in your medical records consistent with the symptoms that you're reporting on your activity of daily living forms? And the big kicker is, are those symptoms that you're telling your doctor you have and in those activity of daily living forms consistent with your social media accounts? Now, you've heard me many times say, if you have a social media account, shut it down. Don't have any posts by family members or friends. The innocuous picture of you at a birthday party or at a graduation or at a wedding, all will be used against you. So please don't have your family or friends or even you do any posting to social media. So what is it about symptoms and functionality? Well, as I've said, ultimately the carrier of the plan has to determine whether you're capable of doing the material and substantial duties of your occupation, notwithstanding all of the medical problems that you have. And again, this goes to the definition of disability and occupation in your policy or plan. Now, your doctor's going to be asked to complete attending physician statement forms that comment on your functional abilities. And in part, doctors do rely on what it is you have to say. Now, by the way, as an aside, the APS forms, in my opinion, don't ask the right questions, but that's a different narrative, if you will. Now, at some point in time, the disability carrier may say to the doctor, look, you are basing your opinion about the client's restrictions and limitations and ability to do their material and substantial duties based on what your patient, our policyholder or plan beneficiary, says. And by the way, doctor, we've got some social media accounts that say they're doing things that are again consistent with the restrictions and limitations or what you told or what the patient told you. So doctor, would you change your mind about the ability to work or the restrictions and limitations? You can also be assured that the insurance company or the plan is going to have your medical records reviewed by their liar for hire staff, nurses, or doctors. And at some point, they are going to question your restrictions and limitations because, after all, they don't want to pay benefits for a second longer than they have to. And that's particularly true when the definition of disability changes from an inability to do your own occupation and any occupation. Why is that true? When you're at the any occupation stage, basically they have to prove, in quotes, that you can do at least a sedentary type job, which is basically sitting down all day. So they're looking at these medical records not only at the own occupation stage, but the any occupation stage to see if there are some way that they can attack restrictions and limitations. And it is inconsistency between what you say in those ADL forms, what you tell the doctor, and what you may even be telling the adjuster in that not so friendly phone call that you think is just an innocuous phone call. So what I try to do is to have my clients take the document that I described, symptoms and functionality worksheet, and take that to the doctor after I've reviewed it and approved it and ask that that be made part of the chart. But we also want to compare that with what's on the ADL forms. So do you have difficulty sitting? Do you have to alternate sitting and standing every 45 minutes? Do an hour? Do you have to get on the floor? Are you in a recliner? Do you have trouble walking the dog? Do you have trouble stooping, bending, lifting? So think about that in terms of practicalities. You might have difficulty standing in front of the kitchen sink doing dishes, or you might have difficulty just sitting in a chair at the dining room table. You want to be telling your story to the disability carrier and to the doctor in terms of symptoms and functionality. Now, of course, you live it every day, so you should be able to provide some details about the problems that you're having so that ultimately the carrier, your doctor, maybe their doctor, maybe ultimately a judge, can understand your symptoms and your functionality. You can see that honesty and consistency is the key to getting and keeping your ERISA disability insurance benefits. Got it? Let's take a break.
Robbed of your peace of mind by your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claims process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.